Well, Jack Dangermond and I would like to thank the editors of FreightWaves for inviting us to have this conversation about how information is transforming the logistics ecosystem. Over the past couple of years, Jack has become a real mentor and a real friend. He has built one of the most powerful information systems in the world, providing more than 350,000 customers a home for geospatial information through their cloud-based platform called ArcGIS. I think of Jack as the Leonardo da Vinci of really the architect of the GIS world. Esri is not only not that widely known in logistics, but it soon will be. Today we're announcing that Saybrook has joined Oracle, SAP, AWS, Microsoft, and Autodesk as an Esri Alliance partner, and we couldn't be prouder. Saybrook is singularly focused on building companies that harness emerging technology to improve logistics efficiencies. Saybrook has invested, incubated, or managed a little bit more than $200 billion across more than 100 companies over the past 30 years. Today, we want to really drill down and talk to Jack about the importance of information and how important it'll become, and why you as logisticians and supply chain professionals should really care. Jack, you've helped me adjust my lens to look at the supply chain really as a nervous system, and that made a lot of sense to me. Can you explain a little bit to the audience what you mean when you talk about this and why you think it's so important?
Well, most of us are really very familiar with nervous systems because we all have them. You get a stimulus, you think about it, and then you respond. It's like something's coming at you, and you might duck or you might move away. It's just built into us. And for me, that's really interesting because when we look at the whole planet, what's occurring is lots of changes. Actually, things are accelerating very quickly. And what's missing, in a way, is a kind of nervous system for us to respond at a social level or even as an organizational level. I don't suppose most organizations think of themselves as having a nervous system, but in a way, computing and measuring things and then thinking about them in computation, you call it, Jonathan, a brain, and then responding, getting that all wired up is coming alive. When I was just a kid, I got really interested in geography. It was sort of the love of my life, one of them anyway. And I love geography because it's actually the science of our world. It's the science of all the cultural things like land use and population and people, and now today, pandemics. But it's also the science of all the spatial natural things like ecology and relationships about soils and climate and all of that stuff. So geography, that's a really cool thing, and I fell in love with it. I also fell in love with computing, and bringing these two things together has really made my whole life. It is measuring geographic stuff, now more increasingly in real time, and then putting it into a database and then being able to see it and analyze it and react, just like your nervous system.
Yeah. And I couldn't imagine a more applicable space than logistics.
Yeah, it is. Peter Drucker talked about this, in different lectures. He talked about the last frontier is spatial logistics, optimizing spatial logistics, because it was all about wiring things up and then being able to minimize friction as you move through space and time so that you can achieve optimum solutions. And he did it in all sorts of areas, but this one, the geographic one, and people are starting to wake up. I mean, to make it very real, most of us use things like routing, in our Google things to find where is it, how do I get there along the fastest route? Well, that's just a little tiny glimmer of the complexity that goes in, and many of you listening know, and especially John, that optimizing in a complex situation where you have many stops, many origins, many destinations, many resistances to find problem solving through, and then wire that all up to real time, like the real time traffic or the real time weather, And boy, you've really got an interesting problem, and a lot
I
of
mean,
fun.
when we think about that nervous system, which I think is just so apropos to the logistics world, where I've spent my entire life, um, uh, there's some things we know about the logistics world that transformative that are occurring. I mean, we all know that remote sensors are getting smaller and cheaper. We all know that more assets that move within that network will be sensed over the next 5 years, for sure. In fact, I've seen estimates that we're going to have 1 trillion assets that are sensed. Um, Not only freight and equipment, but actually the infrastructure will be sensed, and that movement and the amount of friction, the amount of impedance within that system, that'll all be sensed. We'll be able to measure that, and we'll be able to do something with it. So, that means the amount of raw data that we're going to have at our fingertips is going to grow exponentially. But we also know that data is absolutely worthless unless you do something with it, right? Data in and of itself has no value until you organize it and curate it. And what I find so interesting about Esri, I mean, I know I always tell you, how blown away I am by what you guys have accomplished, but you've really created the world's greatest platform for organizing and curating that data. And what excites me about our partnership is that we together can bring innovators, people with great ideas, maybe some crazy ideas about how to utilize that information in ways, Jack, that you and I may never have thought about.
Yeah, when I first got started, it was fun because we would just abstract geographic stuff and put it into the computer. I mean, you're hitting on something that's really important. And I love that idea that I could do a digital twin inside of the computer, make a map that sort of replicated what was really so, or make a model that replicated things like traffic or runoff or erosion or population growth, all those things we could do. But you're hitting on the essence of it, which is the application of that knowledge, like your brain. You could say, well, I see things and I absorb it all, I'm an intellectual or something. No, it's the ability to respond. So you see something, you respond. And in logistics, it really means measuring it all up, measuring the whole model, and then delivering huge business value, because you can find the optimum way and save money, save time, save pollution, create efficiency, which is what the world really needs right now. So I love what you're doing. I mean, I build generic tools for all of you listening, and people like Jonathan have taken that and applied it in particular vertical area, specifically spatial logistics. Other of my customers, like Starbucks, so they pick the right location for stores, and other ones pick the right location for schools, or other ones look at and model the spread of COVID, like the Johns Hopkins map. And we made 1.5 trillion maps so far this last year, just everybody looking at it. So the different application settings for digital geography, or what we call GIS, are just immense. And it isn't really very meaningful, except to scientists, of course, to do all this digitizing unless there's an application. So each vertical industry, whether it's farming or whether it's finding oil, they're all using it to, get a business advantage. And some people are aware of it, Jonathan, and some of them they don't get it. I mean, they're looking at the accounting, or they're looking at the HR management, but the spatial stuff is, where the assets really are.
Jack, I'm sure I've shared with you that, I had a wonderful, interesting experience to reorganize an airline back in the 2000s. And, what we found was the way we were able to kind of fix the business. This was United Airlines in 2003 when they went bankrupt. The way we were able to fix was purely through information, and it was geospatial information. And so that was a real epiphany for me. And I must say that in logistics, in the freight world, in supply chain in particular, which I think is a subset of logistics, to me, logistics is anything that moves within a system. It could be electrons, it can be people, it can be freight. But within the freight ecosystem, we don't think about this in a more holistic way, but we're going to, and we have not designed the system, so we the warehouses can't talk to the truckers, and the truckers can't talk to the port, and the ships that are landing, we're not sure where they are and what containers are on board, and we've got 60 million containers in the world. And they're basically empty, dumb boxes. They don't say anything. They don't do anything. That's all going to change. That's all going to change. Every pallet.
I mean, what people talk about in the digital world is they talk about this digital transformation. Whereas, phase one of using computers, we digitize things and we could do accounting and stuff. But when you start to do what you're talking about, of integrating the different kinds of information, they suddenly say, integrating the information and then changing all the workflows. That's transformational. And I like that. I like that term, actually, is that geographic information systems are transforming our world, letting people see through maps and spatial models the whole context differently. Like you were saying, I'm not just looking at my segment of the supply chain. I'm seeing the whole supply chain and also how it relates to demand and supply, and all of those things are spatial in my world. So connecting them all together and sorting them out so I can actually see it and talk about it and understand it. That's the big thing, is understanding.
And I think one of the things that's really, really exciting about what we're doing is that it's a little bit like creating the app store for Esri. Where we bring where we bring to GIS hundreds, maybe thousands of innovators who are coming up with new ideas about how to service a particular portion of the business, right? It might be, trucking, it might be rail, it might be God only knows what, warehouse management for all we know. I mean, but it's not up to us to decide. It's up to us to provide a platform and a language. Jack, I know we're kind of short on time, but I do want to say that our conversation, the invitees to this conversation is about 120,000 people that have been invited to this. We never know how many people are showing up, but and I want us to have a call to action, and so let me just share with you my brief sort of call to action, and I'd like to hear yours. My first call to action from my community in supply chain, is that if you're in some facet of the supply chain and you need better information, if you would benefit from better information, and that information is organized geospatially, call us, because we're looking for those opportunities. We're looking to focus in on particular segments of the supply chain to say, how can we improve the efficiency within that supply chain? How can we reduce the environmental impact of supply chain? As we all know, moving stuff is the single biggest inorganic contributor to global warming. It just straight up. And the second call to action is on the other side, which is, if you're a software developer, to me, you're a tool maker. You're an innovator. If you have a scalable tool, visit us. Come talk to us, and because we want to provide a platform and we want to facilitate that. But let me turn it over to you, Jack. Again, you really are the Leonardo da Vinci of this world, and I couldn't be happier to have our friendship. But what's the call to action?
Well, I think you touched on some of them. In my lifetime, I used to do projects one by one, and then I built software that allows other people to do projects. But they would be large, kind of wonky projects that you needed a sophisticated knowledge about geography and GIS to do. In the last couple of years, we've been working on opening up our platform, and you said the magic word, opening up the platform with open APIs so that software developers could take it and they could embed maps. Okay, maps, everybody does maps, Google Maps and so on, but also spatial analytics, sophisticated routing, sophisticated origin destination, to be able to support complex decision making. I mean, so much of what you talk about is complicated, but through geography, you can learn these basic tools and magically embed them inside of other applications. Salesforce just did it, by the way. They just embraced our whole mapping and geography platform inside of their apps, and a lot of other ones. SAP is doing the same thing with their HANA engines and Autodesk and others. But that's off subject. The main thing is, my big message is take a look at GIS, as it can help, just like it's doing with Jonathan, transform logistics. But it's not just logistics, it's seeing, understanding the location, decision, all that kind of stuff. That's what turns me on anyway. And it's becoming more pervasive.
Yeah, and it's really, our conversations, Jack, have really changed the way I look at things. It's changed the companies we've acquired. It's changed how we roll them out. I mean, we have a very large construction logistics business. We look at the construction business very differently. I mean, we've grown that business. Now we'll do a little over $8.5 billion this year in that business, in part because we look at it differently. I mean, what GIS is, to me, is so powerful is it's a very interesting way to organize information, and a very unique way to organize information. Years ago, you'll remember way back when, before even Lotus 123, somebody came up with a spreadsheet. It was actually a guy. There is a guy that is credited with having invented the spreadsheet. Remember VisiCalc, right? He worked for VisiCalc. Well, that was an interesting way to organize data. You put it in a cell and you can begin to apply a formula to that cell, and you can begin to measure and compare and begin to see patterns within those cells. Well, that was an interesting way, but that was 30, 40 years ago. I kind of think of GIS a little bit the same way, in a much more advanced way. Instead of being a dumb spreadsheet that I have to put intelligence into, I have to create the intelligence of each cell. GIS says, no, we have latitude, longitude, altitude, and that's partly our intelligence, and we're organizing data in much the way you organize data in a spreadsheet, but it just happens to be a very smart cell. It's a different way of looking at it. It's very powerful.
Well, there's one interesting distinction that you're making is, we do use spreadsheets, all of us do it, and relational databases, which are kind of big spreadsheets, About geography, you can actually lay different data sets on top of each other and see through them and build the relationships. So in a spreadsheet, you're stuck in your little data set, but I can actually integrate every kind of data using geographic layers. And that gives me the relationship, for example, between the weather and traffic and soils and runoff, and all of it can come together, the whole science of our world. One of the things that I'm so fascinated about you, Jonathan, is that you drive efficiency, and you just have a passion about it. And some people will say, oh, that's great for business. The way I see it is it's great for our world, because we have to learn as a society to do more with less. And that's really, picking up that additional 15% or 25% from doing like UPS or FedEx does, routing their trucks better. Wow, that saves 25% of fuel, and pollution and all of that. So, I think your passion about driving with spatial logistics, to me, is, we have a natural alliance here. I really appreciate the relationship. It's really neat.
I've studied sort of efficiency and innovation for many, many years, and I've yet to see anything that's good about inefficiency. There's almost
right.
Really, you'd think there would be something,
That's
right? Like what is good about inefficiency? Nothing. Nothing is good.
Nothing.
And we can create enormous value, social value, enormous social value, as well as economic value, through squeezing out the inefficiencies. And within supply chain, it is enormously inefficient because our information systems are so opaque. And that's precisely what we did in the airline context. We went from 70% utilization of available seat miles, that is a seat moving through the air, to almost well into the 90s. That was just that's just pure. We burn less fuel. We use less labor. It's just a better system. When you're more efficient, it's a better system. Other than not having the empty seat next to you, which people complain to me all the time that we took all the empty seats out. But anyway.
You used an interesting word, which is transparent, and it's one of the elements that I like to think about with GIS, is that you can really see it. You see not only the content, but you see the context. Like, take the Corona map from Johns Hopkins. I mean, literally half the world looked at that map many times. We still make 4 or 5 billion a day. And you can see in a transparent way what's going on. And that kind of collective insight changed everybody's understanding of what was going on with the disease. And being able to take that same transparency way of thinking and have, for example, everybody in the business see where are my trucks, what is going on, where do we have problems? One of my colleagues often said, why are our sales in South Illinois always so bad? And he could see it on a map, and it just changed his whole business because he was able to go in and do geographic management. Or when we were shutting down Ebola in West Africa, we shut Ebola down by taking a geographic approach. WHO did, I should say. And once you saw it on the map, they could set up zones. And, we can't do that so well with COVID, but they certainly were able to within that disease parameter.
Being able to, you can't fix something that you don't know about. And being able to look at, we have 4 different trucking companies, and being able to look at the productivity of those underlying assets, whether it's the equipment or the people, and being able to say why, for example, why are our drivers in New Jersey, so much more productive than our drivers in Los Angeles? What are those groups?
It causes you to ask questions. Like the big thing that we're working on now is COVID vaccine distribution. And it has 2 problems. It has really 3 problems. But one of the problems is, where do you put the places to get vaccinated? That's a location allocation problem. And in some states like Georgia and here now starting in California, we're able to find the optimum location to serve the mass population. And another one is, what's the status of it? Like, how come in Georgia they're ahead of us in California, for God's sake? And then there's the issue of how you go from origin, link, destination, that is, get the vaccine from the factory to, on ice and so to the right places at the right time. So that's a space-time optimization problem. And people often say, well, gosh, we're really lagging, we're all screwing up, there's all kinds of political nonsense about that. Everybody's doing their best, but spatial logistics can really help. In these estimates, we're just comparing certain states who've applied it and other states that haven't. The states that have applied it really are ahead. And so it says what you're saying is there's no excuse for inefficiency. Nobody wins with inefficiency.
Nobody wins. Well, Jack, I know our time is running out, and I just want to tell you, and I want to tell the audience, that we intend to, make a splash and make a difference in the logistics world, for sure. Yes. And I couldn't be prouder to have you as my partner.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate all the audience listening.
Thank you.